like to extend the traditional blanket thanks, first to you, the judge, for being here today. Thank you so much for giving up your time so that we can have this debate round. Next, to the opposition side, thank you for being here today and providing some clash for us as we move forward. And then to my partners, thank you so much for your help with prepping for today's round. So, the resolution for today is this House should reform the criminal justice system. And the way that we're going to define these terms, going into some resolutional analysis, is this House will be the US, the United States, should, implying policy, we're going to be changing a policy in today's round, reform, meaning to significantly change, and the criminal justice system being pretty self-explanatory, it's the way that we deal with people who break the law. So, our criteria for today will be net benefits, so basically everyone is going to have some form of benefit from the plan that we're going to propose today. So first I'm going to go ahead and get into the harms, that is the things that are bad about the status quo, why we need to make a change. Next I'm going to get into the plan, what we're going to do about the harms in the status quo, and then the benefits, how that is going to help and how we're going to reap further rewards from that change. So first, my first harm is that there is a 90% increase in drug arrests. So you can write this down as increased drug arrest. So over the course of the past several years, while violent crime has been going down statistically in the United States, arrests for drug crimes have gone up by 90%. 90%. In fact, according to the Bureau of Prisons, 50% of federal prisoners are in for drugs. So this is a significant portion of our criminal justice system, a significant portion of our effort being put towards those who are using drugs illegally. And so having such a significant block of prisoners being in for drugs, let's talk about how does prison help them? How does prison benefit them? And ultimately help them to become, once again, active and productive members of society. And this is my second harm, which is that release is not rehabilitation. Release is not rehabilitation. Simply going into prison, spending a certain amount of time there, and then going back out into the world after all of that does not help them inherently. As a matter of fact, over 55% of prisoners who have been released do not have a job even 8 months after they've been released. And so we see a big result of this is that since they don't have jobs, they once again return to a life of crime. The recidivism rate for drug prisoners is 82%. That is 82% of people who are released from prison after serving a term for a drug crime eventually end up back in prison for the very same thing. And a big reason for this is people with a criminal record are often barred from certain jobs and from housing. So apartments and other townhouses will look at criminal records and say, because you have a criminal record, we are not going to give you a house, or because you have a criminal record, you cannot get a job. And so once again, as we see people return to a life of crime. And so there's this vicious cycle of drugs and poverty and return to drugs and return to prison. And the other harm of this is the cost to society, which is that an inmate for a year, it costs the government $31,000 to provide care for an inmate. There are certain people outside of prison who don't even have this much to live off of. So the cost to society in this regard is incredible. And so the more we can do to keep them out of prisons and helping themselves by having a job and having housing, the better it is for everybody. So what's our plan? How are we going to fix all these problems? Well, the plan is that Congress will pass a bill which will cause released drug offenders' records, their criminal records, to be sealed after a crime-free waiting period of 6 to 12 months. So if a prisoner who was incarcerated for drug abuse or drug crimes is released and he remains crime-free for 6 to 12 months, then his criminal records will be sealed. And we see the benefit of this is he can now apply for jobs, he can now apply for housing, and he is allowed to become a productive member of society once again. During this time, in order to ensure have a basic standard of living for these people so that they don't go back into crime, they will be given a $1,000 monthly stipend during this waiting period until they can find a job of their own, which is significantly less than the $31,000 a year that we see if they return to prison anyway. There will be, of course, exceptions for certain industries, such as transportation and other such jobs, which may require or may find use in a criminal drug record. So what are the benefits? What is the benefit of having these criminal records sealed? Well, first of all, reduced recidivism. Reduced recidivism. Recidivism is ultimately caused when a former prisoner returns to the life of crime in order to provide for themselves. So they can't provide for themselves through legal means, and so they turn to criminal means. And having a criminal record makes it significantly harder for them to do this. So by having their records sealed after a period of time in which they remain crime-free, they can once again return to society as productive members to provide for themselves and to simply be a part of the system, to be a part of society that's productive and beneficial to all. So next is society regains, another benefit. I'll go ahead and take your question, sir.
What's the rate of recidivism in people after spending the first 6 to 12 months of their drug-free time?
So after 6 to 12 months of drug-free, I don't have a specific rate for you, but 82%, so more than 4/5 of all drug prisoners do eventually end up back in prison. And so basically, Judge, the point of this plan is to return a future to these inmates so that they can have a place in society and once again regain their lives and reduce the pressure on our criminal justice system moving forward. It's for all these reasons that I urge a government ballot. Thank you.
Judge ready? Opponents ready? First of all, thank you, Judge, for being in this debate. Thank you, my opponents, for being here and making this clash possible, and thanks my partner for making this team possible. So, getting this debate, I will go over the analysis, go down the flow, and tell this House why the plan offered does not have a workability, why the plan will not work in essence, and then I will offer a counter plan, which is mutually exclusive. So, this House is defined as the US. So, since the government just used the word USA, the opposition has the prerogative to interpret it as the US government or the US federal government. So the USA, simply the USA can mean the people of the US, which can refer to a general belief in the people. But since they said only the USA, the opposition comes and tells this House this is the US federal government, that is the US Congress. And it should imply a policy. So it's round is a policy round. And reform means something needs to change, something should change. And the criminal justice system. So the government said the criminal justice system simply refers to the people who break the law. However, they focus and narrow down the debate on just drug users. So first, I'll argue on some off-case arguments, telling this House why, based on their definition, the criminal justice system does work right now, and then I'll go to my counter plans. I offered the criteria of net benefits, and that's why my arguments will be based on net benefits. So if the opposition side, if our counter plan is more net beneficial for the purpose of this debate, then the government side we should win this debate. The standard I offer is one of reasonability. So all definitions and evidence should be judged on the standards of reasonability. Why we do not need to change the justice system, why we don't need to change the way we deal with the people who break the law. So not focusing on drug users, but as per the definition, people who break the law. Why the current status quo is good and why it does not need to be changed. First point, the current system provides for people to be innocent until proven guilty, which gives them a fair chance, everybody a fair chance to prove their innocence in court until they are proven guilty. Also, the Fifth Amendment protects people from self-incrimination. So the current criminal justice system provides for a person to avoid self-incriminating in court. They cannot be forced to testify against themselves. Third point is everyone has a right to attorney. So it does not matter if you're poor, if you can afford an attorney, everybody gets a right to attorney, and that's a very good thing about the current justice system. The fourth point is plea bargaining, which makes the system more efficient and people can meet outside of court, and the person who committed the crime gets a guaranteed conviction, as well as the defendant gets a easier sentence. It's better for both sides, and it's net beneficial for both sides. So current system works for both sides, and the current justice system works well for people who break the law as per the definition the government provided. Now moving on to some off-case arguments, Mr. Educator. So talking about harms. So the government came up and told us that harms exist in drug users. 90%, there's a 90% increase in drug arrest. Even the government says that crime rates have been the lowest in the past few decades. So they seem to agree with our assertion and our arguments that the current justice system works for people who break the law. That's why crime rates are low, because the current system is doing something right. Now, so there's been 90% increase in drug arrests. 50% of federal prisoners are in for drugs, and release is not rehabilitation. And that prisoners who are in for drugs have recidivism tendencies. So while these harms exist, the government's plan does not solve for them. There's no solvency in the plan. The government said that we will seal criminal records after 6 and 12 months, 12 months, and provide $1,000 monthly stipend to drug users who have been crime-free for 6 to 12 months. So now there are two very big issues, actually three big issues here. First, the government has no data about how much recidivism occurs in the first 12 months. So if criminals are recidivist after the first year, if they come back to life of drugs, if they are on some program and they are in support group and they come back to the life of using drugs, the employers' situations are still in jeopardy because their criminal records have been sealed. So that does not solve for the impacts of drug use. Second, they said they will provide a $1,000 monthly stipend. So now, as the government has a burden to tell this house where this money will come from, where they will have the funds, the required funds. And since they provided no means of funding, the opposition assumes that they are normal means. And normal means simply mean raising taxes. So since there is no specification of what will be taxed and how the money will come from, how the money will come for providing $1,000 to 50% of federal prisoners. So 50% of federal prisoners are in for drugs, and we are paying every single drug user. So how will the money come from 50% of federal prisoners right now in the USA at the rate of $1,000 per individual? Also, Honorable Judge, as the government, they had to they told us a mandate that criminal records will be sealed, but they did not give us a staffing or an enforcement agency. They only said the USA. They did not tell us if the staffing is the US Congress or if it's a federal agency, if it's a state agency. So they had to give us a staffing agency, an enforcement agency, and the funding. So their plan has only a mandate. It does not have the three following parts that make up 75% of it. And for that reason, the plan simply will not stand. Now moving on to my counter plan, from Educator. So for counter plan, this plan is mutually exclusive. So once drug criminals are released from prisons, they will put on a rehabilitation program and in rehabilitation centers, and there will be certified doctors, certified users there, certified doctors there, certified people who have worked in the field of drugs, certified people who have experience in crime control and toxicology. These people will work with drug users and certify them at the end that these people have very low or minimal recidivist tendencies, because the opposition assumes that there cannot be 100% assumption of no recidivism. That's why these people will certify these drug users by saying they will issue them a certificate saying they have been drug users, but there is 0% recidivist tendency. And to seal and hide their criminal records, better than to seal and hide their criminal records, is to be certified by a professional that they are not likely to go back to life of drugs, and that will enable them, that will make them better in the eyes of the employer, because the employers will know that they have come from a life like that, and if they have struggled and worked on themselves to make themselves better enough, if they have worked enough on themselves, if they're dedicated enough to come out of a life of drugs, they will work for the company, and this will be better. This will be net beneficial as per the criteria of this debate, as per the weighing mechanism. This will be net beneficial for the drug users. So certificate by professionals is better than hiding criminal records. That's the point of this counter plan. And the funding for this counter plan will come from the revenue or the tax the state loses because of the drug use, or so this domino effect leads to drug cartels being formed and the state loses a lot of revenue. So since we will save money there, we'll direct those funds toward this counter plan of rehabilitating these people. And this goes a step forward. It's mutually exclusive, it goes a step forward in what the government proposed. Under their plan, people can go back to recidivism, but under this plan, they are certified that they're not likely to go back to drug use. With this, I'd like to urge a ballot against the resolution. Thank you.
Adjudicator? Opposition?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so thank you all for being here, and let's get started. First, I want to just say that we agree to your clarification change for stating that this house will be, instead of just U.S., but the U.S. government. We agree to that. We have no problem with that change. I'm just going to go straight down the flow, so I'm going to review what they had, the contentions with their plans, review their plan, and then go back into our points and why you should side with us at the end of this debate. So they mentioned that overall that we had limited it to just talking about the drug users and those who are incarcerated on the purpose of drug allegations. And they have mentioned that overall the resolution states that it's for all prisoners and that the status quo should remain the same because it works for all prisoners across the board. Because we have a system that works on Miranda rights, you're innocent until proven guilty, you have a legal right to some sort of lawyer. Everything is done for you to prove yourself innocent if you are not, or to prove yourself not guilty. However, we are simply stating, and in this debate, for the purpose of this debate, we're talking about those who have already broken the law, not about the parts of the criminal justice system that prevents people from going into incarceration, but those who are already in incarceration. So that is where we are limiting it. We want to have this conversation simply about those who already have a criminal record because they have already been proven guilty. We have no problem with the trial. We're talking about already criminals. Next, they go into our harms and they say the harms that we pointed out were 90% increase of drug arrests, and they mentioned, well, as we said, crime rates overall have been lowered. Yes, that is true. Yes, crime rates have gone down in recent years. We are not disagreeing with that. We're simply saying now the status quo is that majority of the crimes that are committed in modern days are drug related, and that if we could solve something that would stop drug-related crimes being recommitted by the same offenders, we're going to see those crime rates lower even greater. We are trying to improve something that's already good to being even better. That is what we're trying to show you, that we can take that low number and make it even lower by fixing this one issue. So then they mention, they don't really mention much about the rest of our harms, about release not equaling rehabilitation, people with criminal records. They go straight into our plan and say that our plan just doesn't work in general. And they say we have no data about drug use after 12 months. And I think we need a little bit of clarification. When we said release does not equal rehabilitation, and we talked about the recidivism rate, we said there was 82% recidivism rate after 6 to 12 months of being released. And this is without any promise of a ex-criminal getting a job. So what we're trying to do with our plan is promise that after 6 to 12 months of being clean, that they are more likely to get a job, where previously the reason why the recidivism rates were as high as they are is because it's nearly impossible for previous criminals to receive housing or receive a job, so they automatically go back to what they know, which is getting involved with drugs. So we are seeing that this rate is so high. However, if we can promise them a future, they're more likely to stay clean for the sake of a better future. Therefore, that's how that data works. No funding. Now, I think there's a little confusion. This funding was implied when we were mentioning Congress. Now, when we said that it costs $31,000 per prisoner annually, we're assuming that that money that we spend per prisoner, instead of 6 months down the line then being reincarcerated for the same crime, that money that would potentially go to them being reincarcerated will be repurposed to making sure that they can have a stable life and potentially a future apart from us, the taxpayers, apart from us, the government. So it's simply a repurposing of money that already is there, that's already being potentially saved, that we are simply saving overall. So that's where our funding is. Staffing was also implied when we said the Congress will pass the bill. If the Congress passes a bill, it is implied that the U.S. federal government will enforce that by any necessary measures. Since Congress is passing the bill, the enforcement measures is the U.S. government. That is implied by Congress passing a federal bill. Now we go into the plan that our opposition gave, and instead of just locking the records completely, they instead want, after 6 to 12 months, for each ex-convict to get some sort of certification to say that they are now drug-free and that they are a stable member of society, they can go forth. And while this is a nice plan, this does not stop discrimination. Just because you are certified after 6 to 12 months doesn't mean it doesn't stop discrimination against you for getting housing. As we implied with our plan, we're not saying that these records are locked for every single case, as we understand that it is very important that criminal records be shown in certain cases. However, we want to stop general discrimination against human beings who created, yes, a federal mistake, but still they are humans and they deserve to be treated as such. First of two.
Are you implying that hiding and deception are better than professional certification?
It's not hiding and deception, it's simply omission of something, and if required, then these records will be shown. That is why we made the exceptions for certain case-by-case basis for certain careers. Say a previous criminal wanted to go into pharmacy, the company, the housing agency can request a criminal record, and based on said situation, they can be granted that. We don't want this information available to the general public based on this certain crime. We're not saying all criminals, we're not wiping their record. We're simply locking it unless it is necessary. So general public can't know, but if a housing department needs it, if some sort of career, some sort of company needs that record, they can contest it, they can request it, and the exceptions are already put in our plan. Walker, how much time do I have?
Yeah, 40 seconds.
Okay, so overall, our plan is simply to ensure that criminals are still treated as humans. Yes, they made some terrible mistakes, and we are only trying to solve 50%. We do not want those who were involved in drugs to continually go back. We want them to be rehabilitated. We want them to have a future. We punished them enough already by having them in prison. We don't need to continually punishing their future by having the general public discriminate against them for past mistakes. Thank you.
First, I would like to thank everybody for being here today, the judge for taking time out of his weekend to judge this round, the government team for building a great case, and my partner for helping me build this case. So let's get right down to it. I'll provide a brief roadmap. First, I will go with the resolution analysis, provide some rebuttals, then go on to rebut some of their points, and then if I have time, bring in some new arguments. So let's get to it. The government team said that they limited to drugs, and then the opposition team brought up irrelevant points about the justice system. my partner addressed every single point about drugs that the government team brought up. He addressed every single point about drugs, and in addition to that, he provided off-case arguments about the current criminal justice system. So this is allowed. He argued every single point that the government brought up, which is on-case points, and then brought new off-case points. And we also made a clarification that the government team said they want to significantly change the way we deal with people who break the law. That was their definition, the way we deal with people who break the law. However, their plan and their harms only address drug users and drug use offenders. They can only address this, so it goes against their resolution, their definitions, because they only address one part of their definitions, only one part of the criminals involved. So for that, that is an automatic loss in favor for the government. Next, the government team also came up here, and the member of government came up here and distinguished that we're talking only about people who've already broken the law. However, they did not mention this in their first speech. Their definition was the way we deal with people who break the law. They did not provide any distinguishing factor as to say we're talking about people who have already broken the law. So we have some partner brought up cases about how the justice system is currently working to deal with people who break the law, and the government team came up in their second speech and distinguished that we're talking about people who've already broken the law. So this is not counted. This one should be struck off the ballot, Judge. Next, moving on to their harms. They said that there's a 90% increase in drug arrests, and my partner came up here and said, and then they said that crime rates are going down, but there's a 90% increase in drug arrests. So they're agreeing that the current system is currently good because there is a decrease in crime rates. The member of government specifically said, we agree there's a decrease in crime rates. So they're agreeing that the current system is currently working. And if there's a 90% increase in drug arrests, then it's working even better because drug offenders are being arrested. These people need to be arrested, and that is currently happening. So the current system is in fact working. Next, they said that they want to make the current system even better by sealing the records of drug users after they get out of prison. However, this does not work. Our plan works to make the current system even better because of the reasons I'll mention later that my partner has already brought up. They said the current system is good, which is what we're saying, so they agreed with us, and our plan makes it even better, so our plan works better than theirs. Moving on. They brought up a point about the cost to society and how it's going to cost so much to keep these people in prison. However, would we rather have these drug users circulating in our environment, in our society? It's better to put them in prison and pay the price and pay the money for that than to have them circulating in our society and corrupting young people and drug users and potential drug users. It's better to have these people in prison as of now. So the current system is in fact working. Next, the government's plan, as my partner mentioned, did not have a staffing or enforcement. We cannot, in a policy round, we cannot imply anything. Everything has to be set in stone. They did not in the first speech come up with a staffing or enforcement. They only did it in their second speech. So because of this flaw in their plan, the round should go automatically in favor of the opposition. But to argue about their plan, they said that after 6 to 12 months, they're going to seal the records. But they do not know how many people are going to go back after 6 to 12 months. Our plan talks about rehabilitation. Their plan talks about, okay, 6 to 12 months, they're good, and then we seal their records so that people can access it. But our plan talks about helping these people, giving them rehabilitation services, giving them a certificate by professionals to say that they will not go back to a life of crime. There's minimal chance of them going back to a life of crime. So instead of, as my partner said, hiding and deceiving their future employers and so on, we are giving them a certificate that says this person has worked hard to overcome their flaws, to overcome their mistakes. This is even better for their resume than hiding and stealing their records. But the government also contradicted themselves by saying they're going to give the records to employees who ask for it. So in this case, what is the point of hiding and sealing it if they're going to give it to the employer who wants it? So we're going to seal the records after 12 months, but if an employer wants it, we're going to give it to them anyway. So their plan contradicts itself and has no inherency, and has no workability because we're going to seal it, then we're going to reveal it. It does not work at all. Next. Their plan talks about how we're going to seal the records of people after 6 to 12 months. However, how are you going to track all these people? According to the government themselves, there's a 90% increase in drug users going to prison. After they get out, how is the government going to track all these people? There's so many people. What are people who change their names, people who move to different towns, people who maybe go abroad? How are we going to track these people? After 12 months, they can do whatever they want if the records are sealed. How are we going to track these people? There's no workability to this because you have no way to track these people. You can't track them or seal their records. It just does not work in any way. Next. The government said that you can't seal the records. Certainly, you have to give it to the employees, and so on. Like as I mentioned, who is going to track these records? And if they're going to be sealed, and you're going to give it to the employee who wants it, what is the point of sealing in the first place? Next, as my partner said in his POI, is this better than hiding and deception? Then this point in itself, hiding and deception is not good. What is better is providing a certificate to say this person has overcome his mistakes. And then to that, the opposition replied, we're not hiding it from everybody, we're hiding it from some people. But they did not mention who are the people we're hiding it from. And if we're not going to hide it from some people, what is the point of hiding the records at all? In conclusion, our plan works works better than the opposition's plan. We have provided off-case arguments as to why the current criminal justice system is better, because that is what they mentioned in their definition. So because of this, we have addressed the definition and provided arguments off-case that go according to the definition. So that has been done. Next, we have rebutted every single one of their points by talking about drug users and why it's better that they are in prison as of now, and why the current system in fact is working as of now. Next, we have rebutted their plan and said talked about the technicalities of the plan do not work because they do not have a staffing or enforcement. Our plan has a staffing and enforcement. My partner said the Congress is staffing and the state governments are going to be enforcing it. He mentioned this. So our plan has a mandate, a staffing in Congress, and enforcement in the state governments, and their plan did not even have a funding mechanism. Our plan has a funding mechanism because my partner said there's a loss in revenue when we have these drug users circulating, so we're going to use the money that takes away from this and use it for the rehabilitation centers. So our plan has every single one of the planks that the opposition missed. Also, in the long run, our plan has more workability because 6 to 12 months, they can go back to a life of crime after that, and we cannot track them. Our plan makes sure that these people will have a positive and better future. And we've also proven how the current system is working. So, thank you.
Judge ready? Opponents ready? Partner ready? So thank you again, Judge, for being in this debate. Thank you, my opponents, for making this debate possible, and my partner for helping us come up with the clash. Judge, I'll go over everything defining the debate terms, terminology, and tell you why, based on certain terminologies and certain standards and criteria, we should win this debate. So I'll go on the floor. I have 9 voters for you. So I'll give you 9 points of clashes, and based on these 9 points, tell you why the opposition wins this debate. First voter is discrepancy in definition. So they define this the justice system as people who break the law, but then they narrow it down to drugs, and that's why all our off-case arguments about why the current system works stands. The government dropped all arguments about the right to attorney and innocent and proven guilty. They did not even touch upon the arguments that we provided off-case. So that's why the first point should go to the opposition. Second voter, for the criteria, the counter plan works better. The criteria is net benefits. So at the end of the day, Judge, you should vote on which plan works better, which plan is more net beneficial. The government themselves said that the criteria is net benefits. So if the counter plan is more net beneficial for us, for the US Congress, we should win this debate. That means the opposition should win this debate. Third voter is they had a mandate and not the other 3 parts of the plan. They had a mandate of sealing the records, but they did not have a staffing agency, an enforcement agency, or the funding. All 3 parts that the counter plan had in this debate, Judge. The fourth voter is about funding. So they said they will provide $1,000 per month to people who have been clean for 6 to 12 months, but they failed to give us how they will have this money for half the number of federal prisoners right now that they themselves said we have in our federal prisons. My next voter, Judge, is criminal records. So my partner mentioned how when employers know that their that the applicants have worked for what they have got, they have worked for the certificate, and they are certified by professional people who are in the field of medical sciences. They will have better impact than just hiding criminal records. The next voter is that people after 6 to 12 months can still go back to a life of drugs, so they will still be recidivist. However, working with professionals is better because in that way they are under professional care, and that way there's a higher chance, they're more likely to be scientifically and medically free of this tendency to go back to drugs. And right now it's making the assumption that if they have stayed clean for 6 months, they will stay clean for the rest of the future. Next voter, Judge, the second voter is that they have no, my partner mentioned how they have no mechanism of tracking people who have stayed clean. What if the people are living in different names? What if half the people in federal prisons are drug users, and if the government faces a task of tracking half the number of federal prisons right now, they have to give us a mechanism. They have to give us a mechanism to track this high number of people. They have no mechanism to track these many people after they've stayed clean. What if they're living in different names or something? So they fail to give us a plan to track these people. Next is my eighth voter, Judge. This plan is self-contradictory. They said we will seal and hide the records, but we will give it out if necessary. So they don't define what's necessary, which means if they seal the records and then reveal the records, what's the point of their plan? So their plan is self-contradictory in not fulfilling what they are saying the plan is meant for. My last voter, educator, is just a clarification. It's a clarification to the House, to you, and to narrow things down, to break it down, break down this debate. The government has to uphold a certain burden. In this debate, the burden is based on the criteria of net benefits. So based on net benefits, they tell us that this plan, at the end of the day, is net beneficial, which it's not. We gave a counter plan. We told this House why our counter plan is net beneficial, and they did not have any problem with our counter plan. They did not attack the counter plan. So they accept the counter plan completely. They had no clashes with the counter plan, and that's why, Judge, this counter plan is complete with funding, mechanism, staffing, and enforcement, and that's why this counter plan is more net beneficial than their plan. And for these reasons, I would urge a strong ballot against the resolution. Thank you.
Everyone's ready to begin? Right. This is the last speech of the rounds. Again, thank you to everyone for being here, providing such a great clash, and thank you to the judge once again for being here today. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into responding to their points and show why they don't hold against our plan, and then give you, the judge, some of the main reasons, the main voting issues that we as the government team see in today's round. So first of all, they contest our definitions. They say we didn't define criminal justice system, we defined criminal justice system a particular way, but that doesn't fit with our plan. Well, the criminal justice system is the way that we deal with criminals, those who break the law. And what we're talking about here is we have a problem, a significant problem with people breaking drug laws. And so those who've been convicted of drug crimes fall under the blanket of how we deal with people who break the law. So in that regard, their argument there doesn't hold. They say that the criminal justice system is already working, that people are getting arrested, that they're getting their fair trial, that they're getting all of that, and we agree. We never contested that point. We don't even contest the point that there's a decrease in crime overall, but what we're talking about is a proportional increase in drug crime and how that is ultimately harming society. And they say, well, this 90% increase in drug arrests, that's a good thing. It means the criminal justice system is doing its job. Well, you look at it another way, you know what's not good is that more people are using drugs. And that's because people, once they get out of prison, there's this 82% recidivism rate, returning once again to a life of drugs because they have no means to provide for themselves. And we are saying the large reason that they do not have the means to provide for themselves is because they cannot get jobs and they cannot get housing. And this is due to discrimination based upon the existence of a criminal record. Now, what we're talking about here, Judge, is businesses and housing places that discriminate based on the existence of a criminal record. The specific exceptions that we talk about, transportation, pharmaceuticals, and things of that nature, those can be checked on, but those are based on having to check for a drug history. So we're not saying that anybody can get these records, but only in specific situations and specific exceptions. So overall, we're looking at significantly reduced discrimination on the part of businesses, on the part of housing areas, based on the criminal record being sealed. And what we're talking about here, the opposition is characterizing it as hiding or deception. And that's not what we're doing, Judge. We're simply saying we need to give these people a second shot at life. And their criminal record is essentially keeping them, it's a double punishment, keeping them from getting back into society, benefiting themselves, benefiting the businesses that they work for, and reducing the burden on the criminal justice system and society as a whole. As for funding, we talked about how this is $1,000 per month versus $31,000 a year to house inmates. And so that's more than $2,500 a month in order to take care of a person who is in prison. So this is a significantly less amount than, say, for someone who is in prison. And since it will reduce recidivism, ultimately we are saving money through this plan. We are, as my partner said, repurposing these funds. As for the enforcement agency, all federal agencies are required to follow the law. If Congress changes the law, all federal agencies have to comply as appropriate. These agencies for managing records already exist. These agencies for tracking prisoners already exist. So quite simply, they merely have to change the way that they do things in order to be in compliance with the law. This is not requiring some special agency, some special enforcement mechanism. If Congress changes the law, then agencies have to comply.
Point of order.
Yes.
So point of order is like I can interrupt in the last page of point of order. Okay. So this definition about the enforcing agency being the states is being brought up in the very last speech of this round, and it's against the rules because the government has to specify that in the first speech so that the opposition has a chance to answer to that. But since the very last speech of the round and they are saying that the states will enforce them, the government has no opportunity to provide rebuttals, and that's why I would request that this point be taken off from consideration.
Do I get a chance at a rebuttal briefly?
Yes.
Well, my partner clarified in her speech that the enforcement agency is implied. If Congress makes a particular law, then other agencies have to follow that law. So quite simply, I'm just clarifying what has already been implied and what my partner has already restated.
Okay, I'll take all this into consideration and not change.
I think that should be good.
All right. Everyone's ready to begin again? All right, so the main voters for you today. First of all, release is not recidivism. Quite simply, we have to do something beyond release in order to keep these prisoners from going back into the system, and that ultimately is what this plan accomplishes. Net benefits, when prisoners have the opportunity to make things better for themselves, then they can help themselves, they can improve society overall by being active and responsible participators in it. And finally, reducing the cost that society ultimately has to bear from this vicious cycle of crime and poverty and imprisonment. And it's for all these reasons I urge an affirmative ballot today. Thank you.